Hello, 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 hello. No upa, no upa today. Just hello, hello, hello. How are you all doing? Sunday Adilaja here. Sunday Adilaja here. Welcome everybody. We have Oluwatoyin Bidemi, Shao Smith, Anna Marie. Good day, good day, good day, good day. Baby Ndum, welcome. Ngoya Sharis, Adeleke Adeniyi, Chinwe Ananaba, welcome, welcome, welcome. Obi Ojimadu, I have your wife here, Rochelle White, Christy Bassi, Elizabeth Ali, Dea InStyle, Layo Charles Emmanuel, Shima Ife Peters, Michael Babs, Aderonke Adesanya, Paolo Fashi, Daniel Asenga, Nkiru Ojima Du, welcome everyone. Brenda Williams, Miranda Ngwafu, Anastasia McDonald, Usheshuku Amadi, Adeola Disu, Lola Sorunke, Donald Morrison, Williams Olalekan, Kehinde Agoro, Amy Bobby, Daniel Oshoma, Mashu Esong, Flem Marine, Well, good day everyone and welcome to the program today. We are greeting you all from Kyiv, Ukraine. And today we are going to be talking about Nigeria. Today we are going to be talking about Nigeria. There is a book here that is called Nigeria and the Leadership Question. Nigeria and the Leadership Question. This book is going to be reviewed today by Dr. James Kisali. James Kisali. Dr. James Kisali is one of the bright minds that Africa has produced. And God is raising up in a mighty way, not just for his own country, Uganda, but God is raising him up for the continent of Africa and for the world and for the body of Christ at large. So as a generational person who doesn't belong just to one country, but who is proven to be competent enough to speak to the issues, addressing more than just his country, but that to issues relating to Africa and to and to the world as a whole. Dr. James Kisali, I believe, has qualified himself to be able to speak to the issues of Nigeria in particular. I wrote 2 books on Nigeria. One of them had been already reviewed by Dr. James Kisali. Even though he's from Uganda, but nobody has done a better job to that book than he has done. He did a great job reviewing that book. So if you missed the review of Only God Can Save Nigeria, What a Myth, you might want to go and look for that review from from our recordings on this platform or my blog or my Facebook. So now I'm going to introduce you to Dr. James Kisali. We are going to have a roller coaster ride today with him. He's such a brilliant mind. You will enjoy his mind. You will enjoy his review. Here we go. Dr. James Kisali.
Yes.
Welcome, sir.
Thank you so much, Pastor. And I wish to take this opportunity to salute everyone that has spared his or her time to be part of this program. I salute all of you. Can I go straight?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
You want to show the book, please?
Yes, I will. I once again want to take this opportunity to thank Dr. Sunday Adelaja for giving me a very rare privilege to be able to review two of his greatest books that I have read. A couple of weeks ago, I had the opportunity, like he has said.
Even though they are both of Nigeria, but they are totally different. Will you say so?
Absolutely, totally different. I still maintain that only God can save Nigeria. What a myth.
Not equal to none.
It's equal to none. I still maintain that, and I wish to urge you, everyone listening to me, to go and get yourself a copy of that book and please read it, because it will provoke you to action. But that notwithstanding, today we are privileged to look at another book, which in my view, for all those who are interested in governance or in politics, this is a book that I would strongly recommend for every person, whether you are from Nigeria, whether you are from Uganda, whether you are from any other country in Africa or across the globe. This is a book that I would recommend you to take on as your manual. And as we discuss, you will appreciate why.
For anyone,
I'm saying that for anyone who is interested in politics, I beseech you, this is a book that you need to buy and embrace. But also too, you may not necessarily be in politics per se, but you are a citizen of Nigeria.
Okay.
You are a citizen of Africa. This is a book that you need. Why? Because every strong leader is only strong based on the strength of the followership of his followers. So, as a follower in a nation, you need to understand the politics and the leadership aspect of your country. And that's what this book has attempted to explain. I will begin by making this general observation that before I read this book, I was part of the general masses that are very convinced that our number one problem
in
Africa is leadership. Whether you go to Nigeria, whether you go to my country, Uganda, whether you go to any other country in Africa, it's very easy. You don't even need to be an expert to give your opinion on why leadership is the number one problem in Africa, because the effects of leadership are so visible that it's very easy for anyone to assume it's our biggest problem as a continent. However, as we will discuss, you will appreciate that leadership is just simply one of the problems in Nigeria. It's one of the problems in any other African country, but it's not the sole problem in our countries. I wish to recommend everyone to do all you can to get this book, because what I'm going to do in the few minutes I have is that I will not go into the details, the nitty-gritty of every aspect of this book. This time what I have done is that, having read the whole of this book, I decided to summarize the major thoughts, the key themes that have been put across by Dr. Sunday Adelaja, who is the author of this book. I've been able to summarize this entire book into only 4 themes, which I have chosen to call the 4 pillars
Okay.
When you read this book from the first page to the last page,
Are you impressed by the fact that the whole history of Nigeria?
Oh my God, that's what I'm coming to.
You get familiar with the whole country in one book.
This book.
A lot of Nigerians, they said they never knew the history of the book as it came across in that book.
To be honest, this book has provoked me to get back and read my own history of my country.
Are you serious?
I must confess to all my listeners that I'm not yet an expert in the history of my own country.
Even of Uganda.
Even of Uganda. I cannot say I'm an expert in it. But this book, reading through it, it has really provoked me that you cannot talk about nation building unless you know your past.
You see?
You cannot talk about nation building unless you know
your history.
Your history. So this particular book, close to 70% of this book is really showing us where Nigeria has come from.
Yes.
And several of the chapters in here are talking about the history of this country, the historical aspects that took place, and that shaped the way Nigeria is today.
Because if you don't know your past, you will not know your future.
Absolutely.
And you will not understand your present.
If you don't know
your past.
In fact, Chinua Achebe makes two proverbs which, in my view, summarize the history of Nigeria. In chapter 1, he argues and says, a man who doesn't know where the rain began to beat him, and not say where he dried his body.
Yes. It's an Igbo proverb.
That proverb is a highly telling when you talk about the history, the past of Nigeria. But he also makes another proverb in chapter 2 when you progress from chapter 1 to chapter 2. He also makes another very profound statement where he says, turning and turning in the widening jail, the falcon cannot hear the falconer.
Things fall apart.
Things fall apart, the center cannot hold. That summarizes what this great nation, Nigeria, has gone through. And I'll quickly now talk about the 4 pillars and then try to elaborate one by one. Dr. Adelaide, in writing this book, talks about 4 great themes which, in my view, are necessary to build a nation. And not just building a nation, but building a strong nation. 1 is the pillar of history. 2, the leadership of that nation, understanding it right from the beginning to the present is very critical. But number 3 is the pillar of institutions. And number 4 is the pillar of national values. I'll talk about each of those. Now, talking about the history of Nigeria, I wish to submit that any nation's history matters. Any nation's history matters. It matters in the short run, but it also matters in the long run. Because when you talk about the history of any nation, history gives a reflection of a nation's past.
That's right.
It also gives a reflection of the present state of a nation. But the history of a nation will also give you insight into the future of that nation. And that's why it's so critical that every leader or every citizen of Nigeria must be interested in understanding where this great nation has come from. That history is so great. Any people that willfully ignore their history, in reality, they have chosen to forfeit their inheritance.
Yes.
If you ignore your history, you are forfeiting your history.
Your future.
Sorry, your future. As I read through this book, one of the things that caught my attention, and I credit it to to Dr. Sunday for being able to research and helping us appreciate the history of Nigeria. Apart from knowing that Nigeria did not begin when the British colonialists came, because sometimes as Africa, the West has tended to portray us that we only existed when they found us. So even when you read through our history, like my own history in Uganda, which I'm slightly more familiar, for example, you begin to hear that the explorers discovered Lake Victoria. They discovered River Nile. But this river existed thousands of years, even before the white man came. So, when you look at the history of Nigeria, back in my own country, in my O-level, we did bits of the history of West Africa. And so we used to study about the kingdom of the Fulani, the Benin kingdom, the Oyo kingdom. Then I now came across the Niri kingdom. Now, this is very interesting in terms of appreciating how strong, how organized these kingdoms were. And that gives you an indication that our people, even long before the British came, were a very highly organized society. So it's not that the British found Nigeria. Nigeria existed long before the British came. And that is pertinent for every citizen of Nigeria to understand. But the key issue is that suddenly when the colonialists came, like we all know, they made their contribution. We no longer continue to wallow in the disappointment of what went well and what didn't go well. But what is critical that you will be able to discover in this book is the research that has been carried out to help us appreciate that when we are looking at our African countries, the ethnicity that sometimes drives us is not the real problem. The religious inclinations that tend to drive a wedge between our people are not actually the main issue. So when you are looking at Nigeria or Uganda or South Sudan or any other country in Africa, the problem is not the many tribes that we have in our countries. It is still possible to be united in our diversity. Once we can understand that we share a common history and we have a common destiny to be able to work at. Now, there is a revelation that was given in this book by one of the British colonialists. And to me, this is what changed.
Harold Smith.
Oh my God. The revelation of Harold Smith totally changed my understanding of Nigeria as a country. But it also helped me to now understand Uganda. Because one of the agents of the British colony, Major Frederick Lugard, all along I knew that he was only in Uganda, but until I read this book, I discovered that this man was being deployed, was being transferred, I think, from one colonial territory to another.
So he was in Uganda too?
Oh, in our history books, we know him as Captain Lugard. He came in Uganda around 1894.
We call him Lord Lugard.
We know him there as Captain Frederick Lugard.
Wow.
Coming under what we used to call the British, I think it was called British Imperial East Africa.
Yes.
That was the company under which he was operating on, and then they come and finally colonized us. So the same gentleman comes to Nigeria and is promoted to a major, he becomes a lord.
Yeah.
But then Harold Smith makes a very profound revelation here, and I'll just read a bit of it because I feel it's instructive for all citizens of Africa to appreciate this. This is on page 51 of this book. He says, I'm in my 80s now. In the past, they did not want me to say anything. I guess that's the British government. They did not want him to say anything. But now, I don't want to go to my grave without telling the truth about the atrocities perpetuated in Africa by the colonialists. So you can see he's talking about
all
the
of
entire
Africa.
Africa. He continues on to say, our agenda was to completely exploit Africa. So every citizen of Africa must understand this. Nigeria was my duty post. When we assessed Nigeria, this was what we found in the southern region. Strength, intelligence, determination to succeed. Can you imagine that value system which the Nigerians already had? Determination to succeed, well-established history, complex but focused lifestyle, great hope and aspirations. Then he continues on to say, the East is good in business and technology. The West is good in administration and commerce, law and medicine. But it was a pity we planned our agenda to give power at all costs to the northerner. They seemed to be submissive, silly of a kind. Our mission was accomplished by destroying the opposition at all fronts. The West led in the fight for the independence and was punished for asking for freedom. They will not rule Nigeria. And he continues on.
That's the West.
That's the West. Now, if you do not understand that history, that past, then you're going to have challenges in appreciating why the country is the way it is up to today. And such that the political leaders have not still appreciated the fact of history. So, that's one major argument that this book puts forward, that it's important for us to appreciate our history.
Okay.
Pillar number 2 is to do with leadership. This book will take you through a journey of all the leaders that have led Nigeria, right from independence, actually pre-independence, to independence up to the present time. And it gives a very excellent account of how every post-colonial leader played and made his contribution to this great nation of Nigeria. In fact, this book gives you a leadership scorecard on every leader, how every leader performed. But suffice to note that as you read through this entire book on what the leadership did, two things to me come out very strongly. That one, leaders provide the vision, as we all know, and the actions to move the nation forward. In a summary, every leader must understand that he must provide a vision of where he would want to take his country and be willing to pay the price in terms of the necessary actions to achieve that particular vision. But leaders alone are not enough. you need a responsible followership. You need a responsible followership as a key to effective leadership. So as you read through this book, you get surprised because sometimes we think that all has been gloom in Nigeria. It's not true. You begin to realize that Nigeria was actually blessed to have one of the best leaders that this continent has had. But unfortunately, because the citizens, the people were not prepared to receive this kind of leadership, they kind of blew away the opportunities that they had. It takes both the citizens and the political leaders to be able to govern a nation. It cannot be the leader's sole responsibility. The citizens have a role just as the overall head of the political institution has. I will not go so much into the details of that leadership. I just provoke everybody to read the book because there is a lot for us to appreciate about this particular leadership. But pillar number 3, which to me is very critical, is the issue of institutions. Institutions, building strong institutions. As you read through this book, the author puts his argument very well that every nation is only as strong as the institutions that are in place. I love what Douglas North has defined the institutions to be. He defines institutions as the humanly devised constraints that shape human interaction. When you think about an institution, you are talking about a constraint that has been put in place in order to make it possible for human interaction. So when you look at the different institutions in place in our government that promote law and order, that promote peace, that promote a well-being of our people, that make it possible that you can do meaningful business in the country. All those different institutions, whether they are to do with accountability, whether they are to do with enforcement, whether they are to do with just day-to-day interaction of the citizens, these particular institutions are very critical. Now, Chester Arthur made a very critical observation. He argues by saying that leaders come and go. And I think that's a fact. Leaders come and go. But the facts of free institutions remain unshaken.
Right.
Leaders come and go, but the fabrics of free institutions remain unshaken. It doesn't matter how strong a leader is, finally he has got to go. But the institutions that have been put in place will endure. And in fact, it is these institutions, when we talk about the developed countries, for example, really, when they claim that they are developed, the whole issue they are saying is that they have institutions, they have systems, they have processes in place that help to govern the societies. In fact, I was pondering about like the Scandinavian countries. Sometimes not even easy to know who their leaders are. I wouldn't even
all of Europe.
I mean, yeah, the whole of Europe. I wouldn't tell who the Prime Minister of Norway is, or Denmark.
Or Sweden.
Or Sweden. It's not very easy to remember him. But all you know is that these countries are highly developed, they are well organized, their human development indices are so high. I mean, the state of living is so good in these countries. That is all we'll know. We know there is law and order, we know there is peace in these countries. They are some of the happiest countries in the world, going by the global is it a
Indexes.
yes, happiest index, you know, you will see that these are the best countries. But we don't even know their leaders. So, this book makes an argument that a leader's legacy is really to build or strengthen institutions.
Yes.
That's really the key issue. And then, pillar number 4 that this book talks about is that out of values that every country must identify and define its national values. When you talk about Nigeria or any Nigerian, what comes to your mind? When you talk about a Ugandan, what comes to your mind? When you talk about a Japanese, what comes to your mind? When you talk about an American, what comes to your mind? It's these national values that every country and its citizens espouse. That is the bedrock of the development of every country. And I love what Ayokunu says in this particular book. He says that must be established upon enduring national values that bind every individual in the corporate entity of the nation. That's so profound. That we must have a national philosophy which is the basis of our nation's program in all aspects of the existence of that nation. So the key question is, what are the values of Nigeria as a country? When you think about it, what are the values? What defines us as a people? When we talk about ourselves as Nigerians, what is it that defines us? I want to make a pause and share a personal experience that I got when I visited Japan in 2012. I had an opportunity to go to Japan. I was there for about 3 weeks. I'd gone there for a training, but I took time to observe the society of Japan and interact with our hosts just to find out more about this country. Finally, I noticed that Japan is great because of the national values that they espouse. One is that Japan has a culture of discipline. The Japanese are a highly disciplined people. Matter of fact, they have adopted a military discipline in their day-to-day living. When you look at them, they are a highly disciplined people. The other value that I observed is time management. Japanese value time highly. Matter of fact, it's almost criminal for a Japanese to waste time. Excuses are very rare when it comes to time management. That is something that they highly value. And sometimes when I was there and I noted, I was shocked. I remember one day, very early in the morning, I witnessed people running on the street. And so I thought there was a problem. Very smartly dressed ladies with their bags running on the streets. Gentlemen running on the streets. So I asked my host, and I asked him, is there a problem? And he said, no. People are running to catch up on time. They are running to catch up on time. That sent me thinking. It was something I'd never seen anywhere. That somebody can run because he feels is not necessarily that they were actually even late, but they really feel that every second matters. And so, time management to the Japanese is very critical. I wouldn't want to go into the details of how we have lost a lot of productivity in Africa just because we do not value time. It's been said Africa has its own time. Maybe ours is 48 hours, while the rest of the world has 24 hours. That's how sad it is. Number 3 is that the Japanese have a high level of patriotism as a national value. Patriotism is developed right at the infancy. When children have just been born, the Japanese take the trouble to inculcate the values of patriotism, the love for their country, so that as they grow up, these children begin to value and place their country above themselves as individuals. I remember again one of the Japanese hosts telling me, because I asked them, why is it that there is a high level of suicide? And they told me that with the Japanese in their culture, when they do not perform to the expectation, when they do not achieve their set goals, sometimes an individual will choose to end his life than face the shame of not having been able to achieve. I mean, just think about that. It's unbelievable. Number 4 is that they have a high level of integrity. I mean, the Japanese possess a culture of honesty, and stealing is really foreign to them. Is really foreign to them. They are very open, they are very straight. Their no is a no, their yes is a yes. I recall my Ugandan colleague who gave me his own experience of how he dropped his money, an equivalent of $4,000, as he was rushing to take a train, and a young man saw him drop the money, came, picked up this money, and followed my Ugandan colleague. They rushed through the people, entered the train, this young man following him. He reaches there and starts to communicate to him. He couldn't speak English. He was making signs to him to show him that you've lost money. Finally, my colleague realized that indeed the money he had withdrawn from his account, he had lost it. He picks the money from this young man, and on the next stage, this young man alighted. I thought about that and I was like, how many of us in Africa would do that? How many of us in Africa would do that? That's a very big challenge. Again in 2012, I read an article of a driver in Singapore who got 900,000 US dollars that had been forgotten by a couple from Thailand in his vehicle, and got all this money and took it to the company where he's an employee. And this is a 70-year-old cab driver. I read this article and I was like, my God, 900,000 US dollars, the equivalent of close to 1.1 million Singapore dollars. And he took this money intact. Now, of course, later on, they managed to trace the visitors who had forgotten their bag in the car, and they got in touch with them and they recovered all their money. Now, just imagine that happening in my country, Uganda, or in Nigeria. What would happen if you were a driver and someone left his bag in your car? What would you do with that money? It's food for thought.
Somebody is asking here about leadership. You said something about leadership, and this person is saying Julius Ujelo. In my lifetime in Nigeria, the only leader I know is in America now. The only leader I know, and he was never allowed to lead this great country of Nigeria, is Chief Obafemi Awolowo. He was stopped by the powers that be. The other person that did something slightly good for the country was General Murtala Muhammad, and then he was also killed. So That's what some people are writing.
Brilliant. And indeed, I agree with that observation. I didn't want to go into the details of that because it is so depressing to a very great extent when you read some of these great heroes. You would wish to ask, why wasn't Chief Awolowo given opportunity to lead this great nation of Nigeria? Because as far as I'm concerned, Africa has produced great sons. I mean, we know of the Nelson Mandelas, but until I read this book, I really didn't understand the position that Chief Obafemi would hold in Africa. But as far as I'm concerned, I think that is one of the best leaders that this continent was privileged to have. Unfortunately, he never got the opportunity to lead at a federal level so that all the successes and all the programs, the systems that he put in place when he was a governor in the West, in the Western province, was it a province?
Region.
Yes, region. In the Western region, really the country would have benefited as a whole. I mean, there are so many things that this great leader initiated that are so amazing to talk about. I mean, it's painful. It's really painful. But it's all buried now in the memory lane of history. And that's really how painful it is. You know, but I do agree with the comment of the colleague. So, the key point that I'm trying to underscore here is that national values matter. And indeed, when you read this book, you'll begin to appreciate that the shortcomings of all the political leaders and the entire citizenry was really because we've not yet defined our values as a nation. That what exactly identifies us as a country. If those values are not defined and then deliberately imposed on everybody so that we can now begin to live by them, there is no way we can move forward. That's why I was giving the example of Japan, and the reason why I'm giving it is that Japan was not always like that. At some point in history, they were also like Nigeria. But values can be borrowed.
I want to say that is a good point, because now I'm writing a book that is going to be a sequence, a follow-up to this book on Nigeria and the leadership question.
Yes.
And that book is going to be called The Purpose, Purpose and Calling of Every Nation. The Purpose and Calling of Every Nation. And that is where I'm going to take 5 countries as an example. And I'm going to write about the value system of every country, and how every citizen can identify the value system of their countries, and how every citizen can change their country through the value system of that country. And so the book is going to be called The Purpose and the Calling and Purpose of every the Purpose and Calling of Every Country. And I think by early next year, I should be able to release that book. I'm going to talk about United States of America, the values of the country, and what the countries could do to reclaim back their country. I'm going to talk about France, and how French-speaking people can reclaim back their country and their value system. I'm going to talk about Germany and how that country became great, and how the citizens today can reclaim that by the country. Maybe I will talk about England as well, and why England became great, and how it became great, and and all countries of the world. And I'm going to give people the keys to reclaiming back their countries. It's going to be called Purpose and Calling of Every Nation.
That will be powerful, and I look forward to reading that book, because I am a very firm believer that values or culture for that matter is really what separates the developed countries and the undeveloped countries. I mean, many of my listeners may be aware that in 1904, Max Weber came up with what he termed the Protestant values and the spirit of capitalism. He took time to study why Western Europe had greatly developed, and he discovered that the Protestant values that they embraced, or right from John Calvin, and these values were passed over for a number of years, led to the development of these countries. Today, many of us would be proud of going to Switzerland, and as we all know, Switzerland today hosts so many of the global organizations, and it's their headquarters. And many of the financial systems of the world are in Geneva. But Geneva wasn't like that always. Their history is a very interesting one. They were as corrupt as any other African country is. But then they chose to embrace new values. And today, any thief in Africa would want to hide his money in Geneva, because he knows in Geneva it will not be stolen. So I think the whole issue of values is something that every African country needs to closely look at again and be able to embrace. The tiger Asian countries, we all like to talk about, but the truth is, they simply embraced a new value system that their people adopted, and today all we can do is to admire them. South Korea wasn't the way it is today, nor was Singapore. We've already talked about Japan. Even China itself, they have been able to mix the Protestant values from Western Europe, mix them with their Confucian values, and today China is skyrocketing in terms of its development because they have embraced a new value system. So to me, that's very important. Now, I want to make a final summary of this book by showing by making a proposal. I call it a theory, in my view, that for any nation, whether Nigeria, whether Uganda, or any other nation, to be able to develop, they must be able to define what I have called the leadership hedgehog. The leadership hedgehog. In this particular case, because we are looking at Nigeria, I'm calling it Nigeria's leadership hedgehog. And I'm going to show it to our viewers. The whole concept of a hedgehog is a concept that I've borrowed from Jim Collins' book, Good to Great, where Jim Collins writes showing how companies can move from just being good to being great. So in that book, he introduces the concept of a hedgehog, where he says that for any company, any business company, to really make the leap from simply being good to being great, that organization must have a deep understanding of an intersection of three circles. What that organization is very passionate in doing. 2, what it can be the best at in the world, and also being able to identify its economic engine. The intersection of those three circles is what Jim Collins calls the hedgehog. Now, in this particular aspect of Nigeria, we have 4 pillars that we are talking about. We have the leadership, we have the history pillar, we have the leadership pillar, we have the institutions pillar, and then we have the national values pillar. My argument is that if we chose to have to define our leadership hedgehog as Nigeria, then we would have to look at 3 circles where you have the intersection of these 3 circles, and then we are able to define that particular intersection. Each of these circles requires a deep understanding. Now, 1 circle represents the history of Nigeria, meaning that every leader must have a deep understanding of the history of Nigeria. But also the other circle is represented by leadership, that you must have a deep understanding of how leadership has played out in the country from independence to today. But number 3, that the other circle is of the national values, that there must be a deep understanding of what our values are as a nation. Now, in my view, the intersection of these 3 circles, the history, the leadership, and the values, will give you what I'm defining as the institutions. The institutions is what I am regarding as the intersection of the 3 circles. Because in my view, having read this whole book and understood it, my argument is that the institutions come supreme, come top. So they become the intersection of the 3 circles. So if you are talking about Nigeria as a country, you are going to have to look at the history, the leadership, the values, and then all these 3 are actually contributing to the building of strong institutions that remain in the nation. And if this particular theory that I'm proposing here was to be reflected in form of a house, what I would call a leadership house, then you'd be having something of this nature. That when we talk about, yes, is it visible? Yes, from the other 3 circles, I am now presenting it in form of what I'm calling the leadership housing model, where you have a house. If Nigeria was a house, the foundation would not be seen.
Yeah.
But that foundation is actually the national values. That house, to be strong, will be founded on those values. But then it has the pillars. One of the pillars is its history. The other pillar is its leadership. But then it has a roof, which is the institutions, because the roof is the most visible aspect of every house. That even when you are from a distance, you can easily see the roof. People will see the institutions. The institutions will reflect what this country is. So to me, my argument is for us to be able to build a strong Nigeria, a strong Uganda, a strong Africa, my thesis is we must be interested in the history, in the values, in the leadership, and all these finally helping us to build the institutions that hold our country together. That's my whole summary of this book.
Excellent. Excellent. Could you share the book again, please? Nigeria and the leadership question. If you don't have a copy of this book, you can go and get it on Amazon. Amazon or Okada Books. You can go to Okada Books, you'll be able to get a copy, or you could go to Amazon to get a copy. Did we use this book at the HMT?
No.
No, okay.
No.
So you people who are not aware, you people didn't read this book yet.
Some have read it.
Some have read it. Huh?
We have it at home.
Yeah, but you who have read it, and you want to comment on this?
Yes.
Okay. This is Dr. Ladishoroke here. What would you like to say about that book? You say are you familiar with it?
I read it.
Show us, please, and tell us your own opinion.
Well, when I first got this book, I got the book even before it was released on Amazon. I happened to be in Ukraine in April when Pastor wrote this book. I was getting ready to release it. So we got the very first initial copies. And as soon as I got back to California, USA, I was so intrigued because the title really caught my attention. That is it the leaders that are so bad? Or is it that we don't have any institution that works? And this book will make the argument for you that Nigeria has had very good leaders.
Yep.
As the book will tell you, it will chronicle it from Tafawa Balewa down to Idi Agbon. If you want to know what these great leaders did and what the vision they have for Nigeria, you got to read this book. I did not know. Even though I was in Nigeria then, I saw this transformation going on. I didn't know what was actually happening. We systematically either get rid of these people or we just kill them outright. What is pervasive in Nigeria, as I know, first-hand information, is that man in humanity to man is so great. And what this book is profiling to us is that let's stop blaming the leaders.
Yeah.
When the righteous reigns, people rejoice. We as Christians that really believe that we have the value system to give to the nation needs to arise and begin to take our rightful places. We can't just keep blaming other people. We have to understand that every nation deserves its leaders. And because of that, it is out of the ports, when we stay at the port of the whole Nigeria, that's where the leaders come from. So if we can develop a national value system and begin to build a institution that is going to last, what that will do for us is that stay at the port, pick anybody out of the port, it will reflect that value. And I think, to me, our problem is not leadership, is that we have no value system.
Right.
For example, if you have a case and you go to the police and you say, oh, somebody duped me, I need you to come and arrest, they tell you they don't have vehicle. How can the police department work without vehicle? So you have to give them mobilization fee for them and supply the vehicle. I mean, some of these things just doesn't make any sense. So why are we spending all these billions of naira and saying that we are giving it to the police? That's just an example. But this book, if you have not read it, please, I beg you, as a Nigerian that wants to see progress, you need to get a copy. I've read it once. I'm going to pick it up again and reread it. And I just pray that every one of us that want to see the progress of Nigeria actually get a copy. If I have the money, I will give every Nigerian leader a copy of this book. Thank you, Pastor, for writing it.
Thank you. Would you like to say a few words about that?
Yes, my name is Lola Sharonke, and I also had the wonderful opportunity of getting this book way before it was open to the public. Nigeria and the Leadership Question. Of course, when you read it, you wonder, you say, of course, we have bad leaders and all the rest of it. But of course, if you read it, you'll find out that we actually do have some good leaders, but we do have other issues. It's not just leadership, but there are other factors. But you know, one of the most interesting things, and thank you very much, Dr. James, because he mentioned something that I was absolutely curious about when I read the book. Dr. James told us that if Nigeria were a house, that the foundations would have been the values. And as I was reading this book, I got the history part that actually when Nigeria started up, when they wanted to put Nigeria as a country, the actual foundation, the reason for why they put it together was faulted already. It wasn't built on good values. It was actually built on corrupt and bad values. And knowing our history is absolutely important, because if many of us had known through the years that actually the foundation that we're built on is one of corruption, not of good values, I think it would have given us a chance to rethink and to set those values straight so that we can have a strong foundation. I feel that's one of the main reasons why Nigeria is the way it is. Now, several years has passed, and now we're discovering through this book that Dr. Sunday Adelaja wrote, that these factors, leadership is just one element, but then others, including value, are a very important part. So from now on, I'm looking at, okay, value, now we have to find out how can we now put good values into the nations, into the minds of our people, so that we can build a strong country. So that's one of the things that was really striking to me, that values had to do a lot with the way Nigeria is today. Thank you.
Wow. Okay.
Hello everyone, my name is Nkiro Jimadu, and I happen to have this book too. And just like Mama Shoronke said, values, our values in Nigeria is, that's where we have to start. And that is why I love the presentation that we did yesterday at HMT concerning trying to treat the problem from the root. Like Pastor said, that there's going to be, is it 3 months or 3 years of, 3 years of teaching to, to help change the people's mindset and the values that we follow. And another thing is knowing that our past, knowing the history, because I'm not too much into history. So I learned a lot from this book to know my own history. You know, most of us, we are into every other thing, but even when I was in school, I hated history. But the book helped me to know a lot of things about my country. And if we were like that, if we were that good before, we can do that again. It shows that it's doable. It shows that we can change if we have the right leaders and good followers that are willing to follow what are being taught. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right. Well. The book is on Amazon. So many things I can say about this book. My head is just full. Every page of the book is coming back to me. But like somebody said, the book has to be put in the hand of every school, every student, and hoping that will happen one day. Well, let me ask you people this. Is the effort of me sitting down to put this book together, is it worth it anyhow? Will you say that it's worth the effort?
It's more than worth the effort, if I may say so. This book helps us finally to deal with the leadership question of Nigeria and any other country in Africa. Because if we are talking about addressing leadership, then this book is helping us from the mathematical point of view that you are beginning from first principles. And the first principles is that you have got to understand the historical implications of the country, that you cannot come up with a leadership solution to the problems of this country unless you understand the history. So in my view, you have greatly helped all of us to appreciate the role of history in national development. I think, to me, that is the biggest contribution of this book, helping us to understand the role of history in national development. At least at a personal level, I'm going back to read my history, to read the history of my country and understand it. And now begin also to read the history of different countries of Africa, because I realize it helps us to be able to be well informed as we make decisions that will help our masses.
What would you say about that question?
Well, I really want to thank you, like I said before, for writing the book. My concept of what the book has done and needs to continue to do is to raise a dialogue. Just like we discuss other issues about corruption and things, the issues in this book needs to be discussed. I was reading some of the comments people are making online. They don't even know what it means to have a national value. I mean, I'm just sitting here amazed that if you don't even know how to define national value, how are we going to deal with it? Some people are hearing it for the first time. That part of war, the composition of a country is having a core. You see, I've been an American citizen for decades now. America will make me take a geography, literature class just because I want to be a citizen, so that I know the history of the country before I become a citizen. And who are just born into that country and we don't even know how the country survived. Okay, I will attempt to answer that person that asked, how do we begin to build national value? It starts with you. You see, the issue that I have to get ahead of everybody. I'm there now, I'm the king, so I will take as much of the cake as I can. It needs to stop. That's not a value system. Nobody goes to the grave with millions of dollars. You're going to leave it here. So begin from the fact that, number one, you're going to die poor. But your life, God has given you your life and your influence to influence other people. Start living for other people. Not just me, and I. The more you add value to other people, that is, allow other people to even rise above you, the more God is going to bless you. And I'm not talking about waiting for some religious blessing. I'm talking about, if you want to get ahead, you have to bless so many people. If you are producing pin, and that pin is needed by 1,000 people, and you sell it for a penny, that means you make 1,000 pennies. Let's begin to reason that way. And if the change starts with you, you will realize that your whole community will be changed in no time. But what I see in Nigeria, every time I go there, what did you bring for me? I was at the airport one day with one of my wife's friends in Abuja. And they were going through all the luggage. And guess what? One of the female police officers said, "Can I have this skirt?" How can you take somebody's clothes? Those are bad national values that we have. We always think about ourselves. What's she going to wear? Because you see a fine skirt in the... We need to really change. Dr. Elijah, what you've done in this book, we need to take it one step further. Whether we're going to create a dialogue avenue to talk about some of these issues, and we're going to see change, or we should stop criticizing and start looking at some of the things that Doctor has talked about here. We have a rich history. We know how to really rule our own country, even before the British come. Let's stop blaming the British that they gave the power to the North. What are we doing in our own community to change it? We're talking about national values. We're talking about the pillars of leadership. Listen, I believe that if I change and the whole other person change, the leadership question will be no question anymore. Because if you pick me tomorrow to be the president, because my value has changed, I'm going to rule based on that value system. We should stop being greedy. One person wants to own 10 houses all over the world. Listen, you coming to London to come and buy £4 million house, you're not going to go to the grave with it. If God has blessed you, keep the money in your community to create job for other people. And Dr. Adelaja, thank you very much for writing. I think it's worth it. We just need to take it a level further and begin to have a dialogue on these issues so that it can really impact our life and change it for the better. And I really think our religious leaders have not helped us, because they are not talking about these things. What we are hearing is that they are using their jets to actually cut money out of the country. All those nonsense needs to stop if we really want to see the country change. Thank you very much.
I'm sorry.
Anyone wants to say anything to that? Okay. All right, everybody. Well, that was a nice time to be with you all today. I guess that tomorrow morning I will have to start, continue talking about the relationship and the difference between men and women. But so I think it would be a good thing to do to call Nkiru to tell us about her book that is coming up today.
Okay. We have all the links all over Facebook. One of the books is Relationships 101, written by me specially, to give you the tips to do good to your man, or to tell him how to relate with you to create a happy home. And the other book is Who is Right, He Said, She Said. That one I don't have the copy now, if somebody grabbed it, but it's on Facebook, and I just shared the link on this broadcast where you can get it. So we have a very big discount, $0.99 for just 3 days, for it to make it to make it possible for everyone to be able to grab it at this time. After the third day, the price goes up because the book is very, very valuable. We also have the hard copies on Amazon already. I will share all the links in this broadcast. So thank you everyone that has bought, that has got their copy, and please go back and leave reviews. It will really help us a lot. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Well, let me read one or two comments before we go. Ngoya Sharis, she has read the book. So she say, this book, Nigeria and the Leadership Question, she's from Germany. Ngoya Sharis is from Germany. And she said, this book is one of the best and most elaborate, most honest, and most candid books she has ever read. And she feels that every African should actually read this book, not just Nigerians, that every African should read the book. That's what someone who's read the book thinks. Well, thank you so much, Dr. James Kisali. You are brilliant. You did a great job.
Thank you.
And I hope that people will go to Amazon or to Okada Books and get their own copies. All right. Thank you, everyone, and see you tomorrow. We'll continue to talk about relationships. Blessings. Bye.